Tales from the Lot, Episode 7, The Genesis of the Face Melt. My guest is Dr. Geoffrey Carter. He's here to talk about Deer Creek 90, Neal Cassady's legacy, and much more. Let's go. Hi, welcome to Tales from the Lot. This is Will. My guest today is Dr. Geoff Carter. He's here to talk about the Deer Creek 1990 shows with us, and it's from what I've heard so far, it sounds like it was a really good time. So how you doing, Geoff?
Oh, excellent. Thanks for having me on. I've been kind of enjoying your podcast as I walk around the snowy tundra that is Midland. Great program, great guests. I've been, I think we're all kind of hungry for stories from the lot when, the opportunities for, concerts have been kind of diminished. Although I did see Dead and Company this summer, so rekindled a bit of that. But your podcast series has been hitting the spot.
Awesome! I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I do. I appreciate that very much. Actually, I do. And so where you go to Deer Creek? Were you living in Indiana at the time, or were you in Michigan? Or how did that? What were you up to in the mid late '80s that led up to this?
Right. Well, it was kind of interesting. My entry into the Dead, and I should say that I've known so few Deadheads in my life because how I discovered the band was I was taking care of some kids and working with my parents' friend, actually washing cars and taking care of her kids, and she had all of these vinyl, and she was an art teacher. A great friend of the family, but all of these, Grateful Dead albums and the covers, I was really interested in art, and the covers, as everyone knows, are just absolutely amazing. And so I was in middle school at the time, and my dad had a pretty good collection of Beatles and Count Basie and Duke Ellington. He even had Abraxas. He had some Santana in there, but he didn't have anything with any kind of country twang was something that he was kind of averse to. In fact, I remember coming home from a county fair with a Waylon Jennings mirror, and he was like totally like, and little did I know that Merle Haggard would soon become one of the beacons for what the Dead music was about. And so when I brought these vinyl albums home, because Gail was very generous to say, yeah, sure, take them. And I had then a pretty good chunk of almost all of the Dead that she had on vinyl. But anybody that I played it for, and particularly my folks, it just had too much country, or then it had, the live Dead had all that psychedelic. And it wasn't until high school, and this kind of answers the question of how I ended up there, that finally started to associate with some guys that were into Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. And we kind of split upon the lines of whether Syd Barrett and the kind of psychedelic stuff on Pink Floyd was worthwhile. And I was all in on early Floyd. And the album that was most attractive to me in terms of the Dead was Oxomoxoa. But I was teased mercilessly about what's become of the baby. Right. But I love doing that rag and Dupree Diamond's Blues and just all of that kind of what I now realize is jug band.
Charlie's on that. Cosmic Charlie's there
exactly.
Too.
Yeah. So
love that song.
Anyway, we were in martial arts together, this group that I was hanging out with, and they were an older group. And there was in 1990, as you know, the Dead were starting to take off. And I'd seen them on MTV. And I had the Grateful Dead movie dubbed, and I'd had that for years. And in fact, I believe that when I was a kid, I believed that all concerts were going to be like Winterland. I had never been to a live show, but that's what I kind of, concocted in my mind, that's what they would all be like. And so this friend, while we were involved in martial arts together, his brother worked at Deer Creek, and they were looking, and news reports kind of confirmed this, to double the amount of security, and they didn't want any camping. So they needed to have people to kind of not have people camp there.
Right.
And so a friend of mine, this friend's brother said, hey, do you want to work the show? And for me, it was, oh, yes, I most certainly do, because I've never been to a concert before. I had been, I was also into Southern rock, and I discovered, pre-internet time, Molly Hatchet was playing at a biker bar in Kalamazoo. I did not know that they were a biker band because without internet, I only knew "Flirtin' with Disaster" was a cool song.
Right.
So I had a friend drive me to this bar. We were the only vehicle there that had a car. Everything else was bikes and leather. So anyway, that was the only show that I had ever been to, which itself was strange that they even let me into that Molly Hatchet show. So I had never been to a big venue or knew anything of what that experience would be beyond what I saw on the Grateful Dead movie.
Gotcha. Yeah,
And
you mentioned the news reports about the doubling the security, and leading up to this, you and I were talking. You sent me some emails that had some clips of the local news, and shout out to my childhood news folks, Debbie Knox and Mike Ahern, I guess.
Oh, you recognize some of them?
Oh my! When I clicked on that link, I was just like, "Whoa, I'm 7 years old again."
Oh wow, that's cool.
But yeah, I noticed that they mentioned in there no out-of-state ticket sales, and wow, what a different world that is. And I guess I sort of vaguely remember, when I was going to go see the '94 shows in Auburn and in Auburn Hills and some other shows around the area, and in '94 having to like drive to Michigan to go stand in line at Ticketmaster at 3 a.m. in some mall. And so I don't think it was just that one, but I thought that's interesting in a world where we're all now watching that little guy queue on our phones, to get tickets from anywhere in the country. And
in my case, I didn't have a ticket. I just had a job. So we pull in there, and this was also at a time, it was interesting. I was thinking what else was going on in 1990. This was the time of the panic about Judas Priest. They were in the courts over their lyrics. Two Live Crew was kind of the where the moral panic was going of the day. Mm-hmm. And so to be kind of pulling into this Dead show, everyone was talking about how, this was a new venue opened in 1989. And that the one show that had played before the Dead got there was Slaughter and Kiss. It was the Hot in the Shade tour for Kiss.
And so there was.
Well, they're talking about how this was that scene this scene was going to be different, and so we were. I went again with my friend Jeff and this other friend Aaron from Taekwondo. And then the brother. And so we were in this room, and I don't know whether this is the story that I tell about it. I can't remember if this is actually the case, but I remember getting the T-shirts with the Miller Lite logo. It had Deer Creek Security and a number. And as I tell the story, you're going to see some drugs. If you see crates of drugs, let people know. Again, I don't know whether that's, whether that was actually said. But anyway, it was hot. And the first day that I really remember is just going for the first time. This was my first concert. So I've got the security shirt on. I'm 165 pounds soaking wet. I'm not looking like any kind of beefy, security guy. Right. And was continuously asked during the day, "Hey, man, I'll pay you some money for that shirt." Right? I mean... So, but it was hot, and we were walking around Dead, the village, and there wasn't really, from what I recall, no discernible place that was the shakedown street. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of diffuse, and I remember the grilled cheese sandwiches. First time that I saw grilled cheese with sprouts in it. I never saw that as a combo before, and it was delicious. We wandered around the lot, and there was a refrigerated truck. And every once in a while, Jeff and I would go and sit in this truck just to cool off. And he was either just started. I think this was the summer just before he was to start to be a airborne ranger at Fort Benning. And he was pretty serious about doing the job that we were supposed to do. I kind of felt like with having the T-shirts that we should try to get into the show because it seems like a ticket. Right. And we were told on the first night, you guys need to stay and walk the lot. And I was tremendously disappointed by that. I knew I was getting paid, but I didn't really come here to work.
Right. Yeah.
but but Jeff was much more kind of duty bound, and even though he liked the Dead, and I think that he would have liked to have gone in if that was the job, then he didn't question that. And because we were good friends, it was disappointing. But when that music started up, it was it was tremendous. I mean, you could hear it pretty good in the lot anyway, even though you couldn't see it, you couldn't get the energy. And I have to say, there wasn't much that happened in the lot during the whole show.
Yeah.
I do have a faint memory of when it must have been the Dew. The Dew on the second set is an absolute ripper.
Yeah.
And
that whole okay, so there's a drum segment, I think, that starts with some like odd cackling that I've never heard.
Right. Yeah, the laughter stuff.
Laughter. And what's funny, I have to tell this little tidbit. I was listening to this on Archive, and as I'm scrolling through the post, just kind of getting, just seeing if anybody was there and some, tidbits or whatever. Somebody posted about how they had gotten the cassette of it back in the day. And, as it happens, sometimes we would lose a little bit of drum space in the flip. And evidently the cackling part had been missed on his tape. And so he completely thought that he hallucinated the whole thing until 10 whatever years later, he gets on archive.org and listens to the show and is like, aha, it actually happened. So whoever that was in Archive, great story.
Well, I don't really remember the laughter per se, but I do remember when there must have been that solo, because the crowd and you could see the whole stadium just was like, I was like outside of it, and you could just see that it was the place that you really wanted to be was in there. And it kind of made me a little depressed. The fans came pouring out, and I remember, fans just, I don't think that I really knew the power of the Dew as a live vehicle. I knew it on some of the albums, but I don't think I realized how unusual it was to get one. And people were almost weeping over how great that was.
It was a mic drop. I mean, there's no Love Light after it. There's no Not Fade Away. I mean, as typically happens, they're just like blah later.
So I remember, we were, part of the job was to clear the lot. And so we were basically making sure that people couldn't camp. Kind of ridiculous, because we had to get everyone out by, I think, 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and they could come back in at 6 a.m. But I do remember, people being really enthused about that. In listening to that day again, the one that got away from me, one of the songs I really like is Looks Like Rain. And I would finally catch up with Bobby doing Looks Like Rain when I went to the 1996 Further Festival. This is right after Jerry died at Pine Knob, and I got a Looks Like Rain. But, beautiful. And I also remember, and this also is kind of, people were talking about Brent in a way that was a little bit, I was surprised. And again, this is just a brief memory, but they're kind of talking about how over the top his performance was. And personally, I loved, In the Dark and Built to Last. I love Brent. And I was surprised that they were a little bit, at least a few of the people were kind of dismissive of, and I think it was, what was the song that, Easy to Love You. That was the Brent song. Yeah. And, so the next night I wouldn't get a Brent song, but I will say something about that. So anyway, I went back to, the house, kind of disappointed that I didn't get in. This wasn't working out. I was actually working rather than, working out. So the next day I kind of, really got after my friend's brother and said, hey, I really want to get in there. That's kind of one of the reasons for this. If there's any possible way.
I did my thing outside last night. Let's go.
Yeah. Then it became kind of, the story will get better, but my job on the second day was in some ways kind of cool, but also pretty difficult. And it foretells the future of one of the most tragic moments for the Dead. But my job was basically to go up onto that fence line and sit up there. And while we were sitting up there looking at the dead village and stuff, it was hot. There was no shade. And it was really like hours of just plucking at the grass. But the boards on that fence, you could poke holes into it. It had real wood, and you could poke pretty good divots out of. And when the band came out to tune up, like a kid at a baseball game, with his eye up to the thing, kind of got to see that go down, from the top of the hill.
Nice.
And there was one point where there was a guy that came up the hill, and I said, "Hey, you can't be up there." And he looked like just like a regular hippie, and he showed me his badge. And I have to say, other than that, I don't remember, other than the police in the lot, by the, for traffic, I really don't remember any police officers per se. That was the only person who, was undercover, but there wasn't a presence of police.
Yeah. And I sort of agree. And I always heard rumors about those guys walking around, those undercover guys that look convincing,
Right.
And,
this guy looked convincing.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that you thought you might have heard that they said, as long as there's not like crates of drugs. So
right.
Maybe my paranoia was just over the top, but I was just like, being in central Indiana, you're like, you got like half a gram of weed and you're like, oh, I'm going to prison.
I didn't get the sense that I got was that they were going to be pretty permissive about, and just the expectation was there, and that you shouldn't go trying to tell on somebody about that. This is what the scene is kind of what the story I got.
Good to know.
So as the next night started, as soon as the show started, we went right over to the edge. There was a chain link fence where the wooden fence kind of ends, and you can see a little bit of the stage. And they fired up Jack Straw, and I may have had some live Dead, but I didn't really have a lot of bootlegs, and of course Jack Straw doesn't show up on any albums.
Yeah, Europe 72, I think is it, right?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, but I don't know whether I had the 72 recordings. I know I had live Dead, really kind of early stuff, but I don't know whether I had like Jack Straw. So I didn't really, but I was a cooker. I'm like, wow. And then I was starting to really feel it, because I'm really close to being in there, but I'm not quite into the show yet. You know what I mean? But Jeff and I are kind of enjoying it, and they come back with They Love Each Other. Never heard that song before, and it is one of my favorites to play. I've been working on the guitar for a little bit, and I really, that was a great one. But it was the next song. Did you?
I did. I listened to both nights, and that They Love Each Other is like the group, like the pocket of it is just like yeah, just bouncing along, good stuff.
And it was great, but it was that next song that disarmed me in a way that I really felt like I had, and that was Desolation Row.
Best Desolation Row ever.
I had never heard that song before. I had some familiarity with acoustic Bob Dylan, but I didn't know where that song was coming from. And as Bobby's voice kind of roared up the hill to me, and you can hear this on the recording, how it echoes inside Deer Creek. I mean, the acoustics. And he starts going on these lyrics. And this was at a time, I'm 17, I'm a junior in high school, just kind of really getting interested in literature and that kind of thing. And he's talking about Ophelia and Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot fighting in the captain's tower, and Einstein dressed as Robin Hood, and all of these literary allusions. I was like, the lyrics were just one after another. I couldn't believe that he could remember all the words.
Yeah, indeed. Can you do it now? You mentioned you're a guitar player now. Is that one of the tunes that you could get through these days?
Well, I have tried some of these, those are epic, right? Yeah. Not so much. But I've given it a shot, of course. But
of course.
But I just remember that was one where, and I did know, and this would eventually come. I knew that I could get the concert. That part of it, even though I was, feeling like I was missing out to some degree, I was like, well, when I get the recording of this, I want to find out what that song is about. I was really intrigued. My ear was just really drawn. So that was And it was this went, it's a long song too, and it's interesting that in 1995, when the fence came down,
That was the
that
one.
was that was the song, and what a kind of moment between 90 and 95. So,
The look on Bob's face is like forever in my head. I mean, just like
uh-huh.
seeing that happen as that song's playing, and then looking down at Bob and just like his eyes are just huge and he's pale
Right,
and
right,
like just it was I'll never forget the look on his face when that
right.
happened. It was
No, it just
something.
gives that song already kind of has, this ominous quality to it. And for me, it was, wow, I can't get, that was the moment that I felt in terms of the live experience that I was really starting to absorb what this was about, why people were there. I mean, I love the other stuff, but this was,
Yeah.
kind of felt, for me. And then it busts into Row Jimmy. Always love Row Jimmy. I know, Grateful Dean sometimes, mocks it. I don't know if you've ever checked out some of Grateful Dean's reviews, but
Yeah.
he calls it Slow Jimmy. But and I didn't really get at the time the reggae, quality of it.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, I do now, and dug that. And then Picasso Moon, and again, I was really a fan of the Dead so far as the albums. And so I loved In the Dark, and I think that's an In the Dark one,
Yeah.
and just thought that was great. On to Althea, also great, and then ended up the end of the first set with Promised Land, and I don't think I'd ever heard that song before. What a basic Chuck Berry travel tune that has become. I listen to a lot of Grateful Dead shows. I have three little girls, and so they're outside all summer. The twins are 8, and the other one, the older sister Vivi, is 11. So we spend a lot of time outside, and
Right.
I kind of treat Dead shows like a baseball game, but a baseball game that begins with a Promised Land is always a good sign to me.
Right. Right. Right.
You probably have some of your favorite openers, but I think Promised Land is a good closer. But I also often love that as an opener.
For certain. Yeah. And I wasn't
So,
familiar with it before I heard it from the Dead either, like the Chuck Berry version. So,
well, and
yeah,
that's that education the Dead has taken you through.
yeah,
All these songs, all these artists, to
yeah.
go.
Whether it's Johnny Cash or Chuck Berry or
That's
any
it.
person they do, the Beatles.
Yep. So the end of the first set, I was starting to get pretty antsy though that I really wanted to get in,
Oh yeah.
and my buddy's friend came up to the top of the hill, and I was like, is there any way that you can get me closer? And he said, I'll see what I can do. And they came back with Victim. And I was listening to another show with one of your guests, and he was talking about this pairing of Victim and then Foolish Heart, which is
Mm-hmm.
what this was. And I totally agree that Foolish Heart into Victim would be a better approach.
Yeah.
I get that in hindsight, but
This is a fantastic Victim though, and the way that it just sort of disintegrates there right at the end, and just noise and
oh
atmosphere.
yeah.
It's dark. It's a
Well,
good one.
I've read about this that Phil's bass is cranked to an unbelievable level for this show, but particularly the second set. And I remember feeling it up on top of the hill. And this may actually have played a little bit of a role in terms of why I got in. I don't have any. Again, this is back when I was 17. I'm nearly 50 now,
Same
but
here.
I have a feeling that maybe one of the reasons that I got down so close is I think somebody knew Space was coming, and they were looking for maybe someone to stick in there who could to deal with it, because it was big. And so Foolish Heart came on. I was really kind of almost getting despondent because that's a hit. Really wanted to go, and then I got the tap, and he's like, come with me. We're going to go down there. I'm like, great. So we walk down, and catch the end of Foolish Heart, and they put me smack dab on the main concourse, dead center to the show. And they said, okay, the job is make sure people don't walk here or dance here. This you got to keep this area clear. And I have to say, I remember saying to one guy, hey, you can't just dance here. You gotta stay back up there. And he was like, okay, man, cool.
Yeah.
That was it. That was I remember a level of this, the aisles being completely free of dancers, and that my job was so easy. All I had to do was focus on the show. So I didn't have, I've seen some security guys, they stand with their back to the show,
Mhm.
and but was taking it full on at this point, and
Nice.
really my first show,
Yeah,
first rock show.
yeah, for sure.
So then, it does playing in the band, and I almost regret saying this, but playing in the band concludes and it goes into China Doll.
Hmm.
When you're 17, you're not ready necessarily for the ballads yet.
Mm,
You don't realize how special it is to get that ballad. And there was a little part like, oh my gosh, I'm finally down here, but the party's over. Not realizing that no, it's not
oh
over.
no, it
And
has to pick up again. But
yeah,
that
but
China doll is like almost a conclusion of that morning dew the night before, and
mhm,
the
mhm.
emotion and the power. It's, I mean, I felt like Jerry was sort of in that same space, and that's a hell of a China doll.
I think that's a great way of putting it. And again, I was so disappointed that I had missed the night before that I hadn't really realized how this was. So China Doll, was there. I look back on it as maybe the highlight that I didn't know was the highlight.
Hmm.
Um, but it came out of China Doll into the song that, I mean, Uncle John's band. When you're first getting into it, if that song doesn't connect with you when you're 17 or whatever, it's probably going to pass you by. I mean, most
Right.
people that I would even share this music with, um, again, nobody I knew was into the Dead other than Jeff, and he liked the early Dead, but almost everybody could concede that Uncle John's band was pretty cool,
Yeah,
and
indeed.
it was right there for me, and I was like, okay, well, if nothing else, I can say that again, it's so weird that my time with the band was so fleeting, but I was already thinking, okay, well, at least I got one story out of this. But it was great. And then boom, we're into drums. And I have to say, it was about to get sonically weird.
Hey now, do you have a great story about a Grateful Dead show you were at? I'd love to hear it and maybe have you on the podcast. Send me an email at will@talesfromthelot.org and let me know what show you would like to talk about and what made it so special to you.
I you know I had listened. Maybe I knew that there was going to get a little bit strange,
Mm-hmm.
but as the drums ignite on this, the only thing that I can compare it to, and I think I even thought about this at the time. Remember when Indiana Jones and Marion are lashed to the mast when the ark comes open and all of these demons come spilling
And
out and swirling around? They're like, "Don't open your eyes,
that's the
keep them
genesis
closed."
of the face melt right there.
Yes, I, it was so on me. Again, no experience with live music whatsoever, and to absolutely feel the spirits roaring down. And it went on. I mean, this is not a casual drum solo from a from a rock band player. This is
Right.
this is the world ocean just coming at you. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that's why I wonder if part of why I was allowed down there so close was just, let's see how this guy handles this. you know,
Right.
he thinks he wants to be in front of this, but we know from the night before that this might not be a good
The
experience.
17-year-old's cup of tea.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even when I look back on it, I finally, I got Dick's Picks 40 just came out this year, and it happened to be this show. And I've heard it on the archive, but I haven't really listened to it cranked. And I listened to it again, and I think that I don't have a whole lot of shows other than the Dead and Company, to kind of compare it to. But yeah, it was it was an intense experience, and I do remember thinking, okay, that's going to be a hard thing to convey to people when I share the tape with them, what that was.
Right.
I don't know if that's going to translate it, and every time I would share it to them, I couldn't get my stereo loud enough to envelope you enough
and like the beam sound that happens. And
right.
all the stuff going on.
I didn't, hell, I didn't even know, when Jerry was doing things with MIDI, I couldn't understand how a guitar could sound like that. I mean,
where's the flute?
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot of things going on that raised a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. And then, Out of Space, it goes into All Along the Watchtower. And I did know Hendrix, and felt that groove was good. It was cool how it just, this is one of the things that when I talk to people about the Dead, there's the songs, but really part of what the experience is feeling that transition as it's coming out of something and turning into something else. That spot in the music, again, it's almost like trying to explain someone baseball. If you watch it pitch for pitch, it just seems boring, or but as you watch baseball unfold, it gains tensions and you don't know exactly where it's going to take you. So All Along the Watchtower was great, and then boom, Black Peter, one ballad that I could appreciate because the lyrics are pretty direct. Yeah. You're gonna die. Yeah, your friends are gonna be there. As a 17-year-old, I got that ballad and loved it. That's still one of my favorite songs. And to hear Jerry do it, that one was totally not lost on me like China Doll. And then to realize in hindsight, I got two ballads. Yeah. Really, really something. And then the game changer in terms of something I don't think I'll never experience it again. As that song came to a close, they went into Not Fade Away. Mm-hmm. Great, energy, but as they started to culminate and the fans were getting into it, I was like, wow, this is quite a, I like how they're closing this. Mm-hmm. And then when they left the stage and the crowd just picked up, it was almost as though the music in the front of the stage was coming at me, was just blowing me back. But then when the fans started the chant, mm-hmm. it lifted me from behind. I remember the house lights were kind of on, and just looking over my right shoulder up at this whole sea of people involved in this prayer. I mean, it wasn't just an encore. It was a freaking
full on chant and clapping.
It was a full on. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I had not been outside of my own bubble, and to see, humanity. I'd heard stories of Woodstock. Mm-hmm. I knew a little bit of history, but I really felt like, wow. And that chanting went on much longer than I thought would even happen. Mm-hmm. And right around that time, somebody came up and said, okay, we're going to go backstage. Oh. And I was like, what? Okay, this is getting very interesting.
Yeah, indeed.
So, I'm kind of prepping for that. Again, fans very respectful in terms of just doing the thing. And I wanted to join in too to some degree, but I was just amazed by it. And then they came out with US Blues, and someone who loved the Grateful Dead movie, loved that animated sequence with the pinball machine.
That's the best.
The artist, I think, was connected to the electric company. And, to this day, I show a little bit of that to my students. I don't know what they think of it, but back in the day, before computer graphics, it's a pretty trippy thing. And so I knew that.
That whole bike segment where he's like riding through town into the
and I love, the foothills.
Yeah, so good.
and going down the road feeling bad, and into the wheel. Yeah, it's just great.
Yeah, what a
so
movie.
So U.S. Blues comes on. In fact, that is one song that Dick's Picks couldn't fit onto the collection. So you're going to have to buy Dick's Picks 41 to get the conclusion. But as that song was wrapping up, they said, okay, let's go. We're going to go backstage. And I was like, okay, this is really, and so we went back to an area that was really just sandwiches and cups and newspapers. I remember there was a lot of newspapers, and we stood there for a little while.
Newspaper, what's
then,
that?
right, exactly, right. Magazines, newspaper. You know,
I don't know if we need to explain that to our young listeners or not.
That's it.
I'm kidding.
So we were back there for just a little bit, and then they said, okay, they've called it off. They're in the bus. They're gone. Go out and work the lot. And I was like, oh, you know, there's a part of me too that wishes in that moment that, you know, you look back on it and you're like, oh my, I had the t-shirt. Go over and see whether you can get a drumstick or, go explore. You're there. It's not even like you had to like break through enemy lines to get backstage. You are backstage.
Right.
And, again, my military trained or soon to be trained friend was like, okay, well, that's what the job is. And I was like, all right.
Yeah. He couldn't mess up right before that gig. So he had to.
Yeah. So anyway, we went out into the lot and it was still fun because actually we got a whole box of flashlights and the guys were like, just take the flashlights and trade them for stuff. So we walked around the lot with a box of flashlights and we say, hey, well, you know, what about a t-shirt for like 3 flashlights or whatever like that? And so I ended up getting an Oxomoxoa shirt, which was my favorite album. But cool. we actually just went through this whole box of flashlights, bartering them. And we just did that until the job really began, which was basically helping people whose cars wouldn't start to push them and get them going. And, you know, there were no
in the day back in that time, there was a bit more of those old,
right.
buses still out there kicking around.
Right. Yeah. There was definitely some cars that needed some TLC.
Indeed.
And so we, you know, we helped people, you know, get on their way, and we went through that box of flashlights. And it's funny, there's a stuffed animal dog that was my grandma's, and you know, it was in my house, and now my mom has it in her house, and it's a big, you know, furry Saint Bernard, and it wasn't until the girls were playing with the other day that I felt around its neck, and it had this little friendship bracelet, which I know is from the Dead show that got, you know, I tied it around there, but I'd forgotten that was even there. So a little, you know, vestige of the show, and, you know, went back home and, you know, would eventually receive $125, I think, for each day. So, you know, that was not too bad. And then, then the real, you know, this is at a time before news traveled fast at all. I went to see my friend, who didn't go, but he was at Hillsdale College, and, he had this drawing of Brent, and he's like, have you heard? And I hadn't. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I saw him was when I learned of Brent's passing. And I was like, wow, you know, I really felt fortunate to have seen them together. And, you know, 1990, as my, you know, school year kind of rolled in, you know, this was at a time AC/DC's Razor's Edge was coming out, Robert Plant's Manic Nirvana, Eric Clapton, Journeyman. Those
Manic
became
Nirvana,
the show.
I love that album.
Right. Well, and we love Zeppelin, we love Floyd, and so, you know, as much as I had this tremendous kind of quasi fan experience, because, you know, in some respects I didn't really join in with the whole thing in a way, you know, but I there was like, okay, I've been to that concert. Now I want to start checking off some of these other shows. So, you know, I wanted to see AC/DC. So we saw Robert Plant, and, you know, even the logistics, you know, I look back in terms of like finding people that wanted it to get in the car and actually get the directions, because Hillsdale's a little bit off the beaten path to try to get to a show. Mm-hmm. And so, Robert Plant was one, Clapton's somebody that people wanted to see, that those became the live venues that I went to. And I did eventually, travel to East Lansing, and there was a store there called In Flight. And I brought my 2 cassette tapes, and I knew that you could get Dead shows there. And so you gave them your blank cassettes, you paid some money. They opened up this big drawer, and I didn't realize how many shows you could get. I mean, I will say that when that door came open and they're like, okay, what show do you want? I was like, okay, there's more options here than just my 2 cassettes. I hadn't really seen a collection of bootlegs up to that point. I mean, I think I knew there were live albums, but again, I was like, oh, okay, there's a lot. Well, I just want my show.
That's funny you mentioned that. I haven't thought of this in like 20 years, but there was a place in Indianapolis like that too, that was in the basement. And I want to say it was some sort of head shop. I don't think they actually sold bowls or anything like that, but you could get your copy of Dead Bass or some, hacky sacks and frisbees or whatever.
Yeah. Lots of that. That's what In Flight was all about.
Yeah. And you walk down to the basement and there was a guy down there who had a bunch of tapes who would make you tapes. And wow. Totally. That kind of thing happened.
And to have the tapes and to be able to kind of like, not that I knew anybody who really wanted to listen to them, but if there was anyone who I could convince to listen to this a little bit, I was like, well, this is the show that I went at, which was had its own kind of unique aura around something that I had been to. And I wouldn't really experience this kind of thing again until Steve Lacy, who helped John Coltrane discover the soprano sax, was playing a show. This is years later when I lived out in Arizona, and I went and actually met Steve Lacy. And during the show, he and Roswell Rudd were improvising, and a train started coming down the track, and Roswell Rudd went from his improvisation into a version of Chattanooga Choo Choo. Mm-hmm. And I was in New Orleans, and I found a recording of that show that I was at with that moment happening and referenced. And I was like, okay, well, that's, the only kind of jazz performance that I've, have been to that I know that I was there, because I remember when that train came by and, they wrote about it, and I thought, well, back in the day, that's what happened in terms of this Dead show, to have that. And again, for most people, a lot of Deadheads, that's obvious. It's like, well, yeah, that's actually why the whole trading, tape trading community exists. That was really what ignited, a fan base. But for me, it was just like, oh, I have that one artifact from that one time I was there. I was still, I didn't know anyone else that was into them. So I had the show, had the experience, and was really disappointed that that Brent had passed away. And so I guess I didn't even know that, the band continued in a strange way. I don't think I really, came to terms and thought of it until it's so strange to say, but I didn't really look into them until, I was just got married, and Jerry passed away. And then it hit me, I was like, wow. That began a new resurgence in terms of, because, I would say that, my wife is not it's not like, the stylings of their vocals. And so, that wasn't during that time, wasn't a show that I was going, I really kind of regret, I keep looking at, oh my gosh, they played, at this, at the Palace. So I've listened to that show, or I had a really good friend who went to the 91 show at Pine Knob, and all these opportunities that I had that I just didn't register for me. And I wish that I'd been a little bit more part of a community, but
you get, you are where you are. And,
yeah.
I mean, you recognize now what a moment it was. I mean, those 2 shows, especially, I know you weren't in the first night, but those 2 shows were special. And I think everybody there, you could probably tell by the reaction, was fully aware that those were some good ones.
I mean that again the Not Fade Away was really really quite something. I've never seen a community come together quite like that. I've caught flashes of it. DSO puts on a good show, and their fans are passionate. We went to the Dark Star Jubilee and had just a tremendous time. That had a really cool vibe. I really love what DSO. I've seen him in Syracuse, and I've enjoyed. Well, it was funny. We moved to Midland finally, and this would have been around 2008. My wife said, "Oh, Rat Dog Bob Weir is playing with the Allman Brothers," and I was like, "Oh,
very nice."
Tomorrow. And I was like, "Oh, this would be great. I'd love to see that. Do you want to go?" And she's like, "No." She said, "But I thought you'd want to know." And I'm like, "I do." And so I asked around. And
what year was that?
I guess it was 2008 or 9. We had just moved here. I think maybe 2009.
So that was Warren with them with the Allmans that time, or Warren Haynes?
Yes. Warren Haynes and Trucks.
Okay. After Digging Beds. Gotcha.
Yep. And also what I didn't realize, I finally found a close friend over Mount Pleasant who was retired, or actually he was soon to be retired, but I said, "Hey, you gotta take a day off of work, and I'll do the rest of the driving if you can get over here." And I couldn't believe that he did it. But what we were really seeing at that show was Jeff was on piano with Rat Dog, mm-hmm. and O'Teal was on bass for the Allman Brothers. Mm. And so there you have the kind of nascent Dead and Company. But nobody was really paying attention to Bob. Everyone was kind of waiting for the Allman Brothers to come out. And I was like, I am here specifically to see Bob. And he did another song that I'd forgotten how much I cared about. It was Black Throated Wind. Yeah. And it was really at that moment that I was like, you know what, I'm in my late 30s here or whatever, but I'm gonna try to figure out some guitar. And it was really inspiring to see just kind of the basics that Bobby brings to the table. I love the Blue Mountain stuff that he did, and I'm just a big. I love Jerry and the whole thing, but I in a weird way, as someone with not a great singing voice, I've never held anything against Bobby's voice, and I like it. I have a taste for. It doesn't bother me, and I love Donna. There's nothing that for some people they feel maybe that the singing could be better, and I get some of the histrionics that can happen, but I've always thought,
I love Bob's voice.
Yeah, me too, and
especially things like Looks Like Rain and those kind of songs. As you mentioned, like his just delivery on that and all that. And
yeah, so
those kind of songs,
right? So I just thought, I'm gonna even though I never felt myself to be, I tried cello out in middle school, that I'm just going to throw myself at this. And what the result has been at least an ability to try to play and sing, but I think better because my little kids have maybe more hope, partly because their mother is a songbird. She's a great singer. She actually sings in a band. So they're getting that, but they're getting the guitar from me. And what they're also learning is how to play, a lot of Grateful Dead licks and just kind of fun music that, they may not be attracted to it ultimately, but it's inspired me to pass on, to try to teach them how to play guitar so that they all three can do something with it and play and sing, at this young age of 8 and 11 to be able to do that already. I wish that I had gotten over kind of this image that I had about music when I was, little, to put in my 10,000 hours, but they'll get a chance at their 10,000 hours, right? A little postscript here in terms of, the kind of fascination with the Dead. I won't, go on too long here, but I just wanted to mention that, it also had me looking at the history of the Dead and the roots of the Dead. And of course, the people that they like to read and were inspired by, and that was the Beat generation. And as I was doing some looking back on the Road, I found this really strange title called Off the Road, written by the wife of Neal Cassady. Now, of course, Neal Cassady, the Cassady songs, Cowboy Neal at the Wheel.
Right. I've read On the Road 5 or 6 times. It's one of my favorite books. I had no idea there was an Off the Road. That's I'm gonna have to check
I
that out.
didn't either. Yeah. And as I was reading it, one of the things that I discovered was that she grew up in East Lansing, and that her dad worked in the ag department, which is where my wife's dad actually just recently retired from at Michigan State. So I reached out to the Cassady estate, and lo and behold, the baby that is talked about in On the Road is Kathy. So there's a moment where Dee Moriarty has a baby, and that's her. And so she wrote back, is very generous. She said, well, I'll look for the birth certificate. I think my sister has it, which I was shocked by, to find the address. And it ended up being Bogue Street, which is right across from, right in the heart of campus, really. It is now probably, I believe it's torn down by now, it became a fraternity house. But to make a long story short, we started a correspondence and discovered that she wanted to go on a road trip, which was kind of amazing. But she was heading out to Kerouac's, I think it would have been his 100th birthday. It was also the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. And I said, well, maybe you could stop off here at SVSU. Maybe you could do like a speaking thing, because what she really wanted to do was to go up to Glen Lake, which is up in the, not quite to the UP. It's actually around Traverse City. Mm-hmm. And she wanted to visit this cabin that her mom would write about very often to Neal about wanting to return to. And they had this, she, as a 10-year-old, had these great memories of Michigan. And I said, well, maybe you could come and talk. We could fund that part of your travel. And we could do a road trip up to this cabin, and also go down to Lansing and see, so anyway, it all worked out. She and her husband came, and I was able to do a road trip with Kathy. It was on the road, and
Kathy Moriarty.
She looked, if you've ever seen pictures, she does look a lot like her dad, and has this spirit that when she came, and she really wanted to tell this story, this forgotten history of her mom and her in painting. And so far as the Grateful Dead, I'm afraid that that scene was not something that that rubbed off on her. Her brother and sister actually, kind of got to know Jerry and that kind of thing. But in any case, we went up to this cabin and found these paintings that were still there that her grandmother painted, and it was just really rewarding. She left from there to go to Bennington College, where there's a scholar of Allen Ginsberg. And what was interesting is that Theodore Retke, a poet from Michigan, actually from Saginaw, taught at Bennington at the same time her mom went to school there. And one of the places that I arranged for her to speak at was at the Theodore Retke house in Saginaw. It was actually, the day she did that was the day that Robert Hunter passed away. Okay. And so, again, Grateful Dead world is all about synchronicity. And that was, kind of a thing. And anyway, she ended up out at Kerouac at Lowell, and gave a talk about one of the other characters in the novel was the guy that gave him the Ed Hinkle, who gave Neal the job on the railroad, and is actually one of the characters in On the Road. She delivered a kind of eulogy. So that's how the whole trip kind of culminated, was that she made these various stops and was able to honor her family friend, Ed Hinkle, at Kerouac's thing. And so anyway, I decided to put this on as a kind of postscript to what kind of feels a little bit like something coming out of that 1990 show that I couldn't have foretold. And, actually, what brings me to your podcast and hearing all the stories of shows that I wish I had, been able to go to. And I love listening to the stories and then listening to the shows and kind of getting a sense of what that's about. It's a great way to kind of reactivate all this tremendous archive that exists, that even if you couldn't make it, you can still kind of make it, right?
You can. So, okay. So I have to ask, when you were on the road with Kathy, did she drive?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Okay.
no.
Oh, no. Okay.
But she did give directions. And at one point we got turned around and she says, we always end up, so George really wanted some ice cream and we got turned around and lo and behold, we hit one of this ice cream place. And she's like, this is what happens when I travel. And I thought, well, there's that, that spirit of the roads, but no, she didn't drive. She's just a great spark and spirit. We my little girls still draw pictures for her, and we're trying to arrange where I'll go out and visit in Sacramento. That's the area where she lives, and kind of continue our kind of relationship. And she's doing some creative projects that I've kind of, she does. She's not as versed in the beat books and the music as much as you'd think, but she still is doing things to honor her mom's work. She's published a book of her mom's poems and travel journal. So yeah.
That point in Neal's life was just a point out of many. I mean, between the Kerouac years and the jazz and all that stuff.
Well, and it's actually
the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test book years and then beyond that a few and to be
quite honest, that's also a place of a little bit of it's a hard spot, because unfortunately when he got out of San Quentin, Carolyn divorced him because she thought that that's what he wanted, but really that was a pillar that kept him together. And so when he started to hang out, he really it's kind of an embarrassment to the Cassady family because of how he tried to live up to the Dean Moriarty character. And in fact, I found evidence in the letters that part of perhaps why he was given such a harsh jail sentence for 2 joints was because of his notoriety as being this muse. And he was aware of that. And so there's a place in Kathy's journal that she shared with me. She's talking about all the merry pranksters coming over to the house. And in her handwriting, as a little girl, teenager, I guess, because she was the older sister, it says, I hate these people. She really, because when he was around, he was really attentive. And so the pranksters, kind of carried him off into these other directions, where he did seem to have quite a bit of, hard to believe, think of Dean Moriarty as a family man, but in many ways, that's what he had aspirations to be, despite the fact that he was showing us all a different way of thinking about living and, the kind of desires that you have. Quite an inspirational figure, in any way you look at it in terms of what he did for Kerouac. But I really recommend, if anyone's interested in this, to check out Neal Cassady's collected letters that are out there. And even his memoir, The First Third, is quite a remarkable document for someone who, you live in Denver, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you, I know there was some talk about a Neal and Jack statue that was going to go in next to a ballpark there. And I know that there's some gatherings in Denver, because he's really that's what the First Third is about, is his time as a Denver youth. Does he have any kind of, do you see any?
Not that I'm aware of. And I'm not aware of any statues or anything like that. I know
there's one. It's in the works. They've been talking about having. Yeah.
No, I'm definitely going to look into that now that you mentioned it, because I'm interested in that. But you mentioned you had kids. I have a 9-year-old, and I can imagine. As she said, I can't stand these people that, like, when all my friends are over and we're making music or something. Right. My 9-year-old, no matter how cool any of them are, she's probably like, oh God, it's my dad's friends again.
Right. Yeah. So it must have been hard. It's she was a little bit older, and so the last time that she actually saw Neal, she was having a baby in Texas. Actually on Russell Street in San Francisco is where she was raised by Neal and Carolyn. So it was an interesting moment, connection. And anyway, Neal did make it down and held his grandson and that was the last time she saw him.
Yeah.
So
That's an interesting story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's definitely a connection that goes deep in the Grateful Dead world.
Yeah, I
The
mean,
Kool-Aid
again,
test and
I
all
don't think
that.
I wouldn't have been asking that question had it not been for, getting back into the music and doing what you do with Dead music. I really think that one of the best parts about it, in addition to just the music, is just the whole history that it tells you,
Mm-hmm.
and so many different ways to plug into, the artists that they're covering, but also Neal lived with them on 710 uh, Ashbury's, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so there's that other history that you can kind of, and then when you get into the beats, there's a total deep dive there with the music and
Right.
literature that they're into. So it just
Totally.
it just I wouldn't have asked that particular question about, okay, well, what was the woman's perspective on all of this, but so.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And so you're seeing Dead and Company occasionally through the years still, and
Yeah, I caught him, in 2006 when it started up. I thought it was a great idea. Now, my wife was really into John Mayer, and her sister really got into John Mayer. And when John Mayer came to Purdue, this was just before he was going to break big. And when I saw John Mayer, kind of through the lens of the pop stuff that he did, when we went to the show and he broke into some blues, I didn't know that was a part of what he had to offer.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was absolutely, the first time I saw him, at that Purdue show, I couldn't believe how deep bluesy he was. I knew what the pop hits were going to be, but I didn't realize what kind of guitar player. And then we saw him a second time because my wife's sister really got into even going on John Mayer cruises, and I was less than impressed with some of kind of how he seemed to come across in the news, but since he's kind of come into the Dead fold, I've really found him to be quite an articulate champion of this music, and I know that for a lot of people, it's certainly not Jerry, and I love I'm strange in loving vinyl, but I love early period of Dead. I love the whole shot, and I just think that what he's doing with the music is he's doing justice to it. And there are moments that are just if you put if you want to just put the singing aside, the playing reaches these improvisational levels that there's a great chemistry between he and O'Teal, and to see Mickey and Billy back there, still, and progressing, Bill Kreutzmann getting hooked up with Billy Strings, who's from Michigan here,
right.
and just where this story is going. Who could have foretold that it's become its own approach to concerts? There is nothing like a Grateful Dead show, as Bill Graham would say.
Right.
But that's now turned into, let's keep going with that. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought, here in 2022 that there's still,
Yeah,
a form of most of that core band still going. So, I mean,
it's really remarkable. I'm glad to see, Bobby taking care of himself, and even though Billy just recently, needed to kind of take a little bit of a break, which I think we know after things that happened with Jerry, that if only that he had been able to take a break and focused on his relationship with David Grisman, that would have been a great hiatus that they really needed to do, and to have Jerry kind of focus on smaller scale stuff rather than this giant thing. But just take a look at what Phil did recently. The Phil Lesh, Phil and Friends at the Capitol just this year. I just find the directions that he's taking the music different than what Dead and Company is doing, but just great. And again, DSO, great stuff there. And now Billy Strings,
and Russo.
Oh yeah, J Rad's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit frenetic. I get why people like the energy of it, but I almost like a little bit more of the space, but tremendous playing, no question about it. I would definitely, that's one show that I haven't been to. Would love to. Have you seen J Rad?
Yeah, I saw him once at Red Rocks 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Oh, and I'd love to see Red Rocks just as that seems like a tremendous venue. I'd love to go there, and the Gorge are two
it is
kind of like places to. I don't care who's playing there. I just love to see that venue if I could.
Yeah. It's a hike. I tell you, like when you park, be prepared.
Uh-huh.
They actually have defibrillators on your way up because there's a lot of steps.
Is that right?
Yeah. Like there is a lot of steps from the parking area to get to your seats. Like there's a lot of steps. Just
okay. Bring your carabiners and mountain gear. You're gonna need
some trail mix. You'll be set.
There you go.
Awesome. Yeah. When you make it out of here, look me up and we'll go see a show at Red Rocks.
Hey, that would be great.
We'll go see either Dead and Company or J-Rad or Duran, whoever happens to be there.
That'd be great. My wife would, if it was Duran, my wife would actually, make that particular stuff.
I only say that because I think like that picture right there might actually be Duran at Red Rocks.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's a bunch of shows of it too. But
they do get slighted, but you have to hand them. They really did take the video format and bring it up a notch. Back in the day, their videos were a different kind of almost movie experience than anything else at the time.
Heck yeah. And growing up, I'm the same age as you. I was 17 in 91 the first time I saw the Dead. So growing up in the 80s, they were everywhere, so you couldn't really help but hear the reflex everywhere you went. So
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Awesome. All right, Jeff. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being on here and sharing all this stuff.
Thank you. I'm glad I was able to say something on a half of a the thing that I was witness to was only the second set of a Dead show. I always envy the folks that have seen 100, 200 shows. I saw half of a set of a show, but trying to make the most of that story, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share this. And again, I really like what you're doing with the whole. I hope that other folks reach out, and that hopefully you're having people knocking saying, hey, let's keep this thing that you've got going, because it's a cool way of thinking about this music that we love, and it just lends itself to the road trip stories, and let's just keep those rolling, because there's a lot of them out there, so.
For sure. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep. Thank you.